everybody, welcome back to Kielbasa Corner, where today I have a sweet and savory meat treat that'll unleash your inner Gojira. I'm making this sweet teriyaki jerky that everyone's gonna love. So let's get started. I'm using beef today, but this will work just as well with venison. Just make sure whatever meat you're using, it's as lean as you can get. Well, this is some sirloin. It's actually petite sirloin to be specific. Just little guys. Oh, this does have a little bit of marbling in there, so it's not perfect. But I will trim all the fat from the outside. And the reason you want to use very lean meat is that fat will oxidize and get an off flavor in your jerky, and that'll happen much more quickly than the meat will go bad in there. So I'll get these trimmed up and then we'll cut this into some strips. This goes right into the sausage pile. Now I've got pretty much all the fat and the little membrane from the outside trimmed off. So it's time to cut this into strips. And when you cut your strips, you cut them as thin or as thickly as you like. Just try to get them to all be roughly the same thickness. I like kind of a 1/4 inch cut for this. See, this meat does have a little bit of marbling in there. Like I said, that is not ideal, but this jerky is definitely not going to be around long enough for that fat to go off. So I'll get this right into a bag for marinating. This meat is just a little frozen, and that does make it a lot easier to get straight and even cuts through it. And now I just need to weigh this meat. And now we can work up the marinade. I ended up with 5 pounds of meat today, and that is just over 2 kilograms. And I will put the metric and volumetric measurements down in the description, as well as right up here on the screen as I go. So let's take a look at the ingredients for this sweet teriyaki marinade. And to be honest with you, I have never measured the ingredients for a teriyaki marinade or sauce. It's just something that's kind of in my DNA. But since I'm putting a recipe out there, I had to get accurate measurements, and that meant I had to do a little bit of math. And that's because I needed to convert salt content to soy sauce content. This particular salt has a sodium content of close to 6,400 milligrams per tablespoon. And this is just a fine-grained sea salt. No iodine in here. Comparable to a table salt. If I was using a big chunky salt, the sodium content would be different by volume, but not by weight. This soy sauce has a sodium content of 960 milligrams per tablespoon, and that's a factor of a little over 6.5 times, so I need to use 6.5 times the amount of soy sauce that I would that salt. Now, since this is a sweet teriyaki, I'm gonna add in a lot of sugar. I'm going with a 15% sugar content, which is quite high compared to what I normally do, but I looked at some of the commercial brands and many of those are 20% and above. But 15% is sweet enough for me, and to get to that, I have got 1 3/4 cup of white sugar. You could use brown sugar as well. Not really gonna notice much of a difference with all this soy sauce in there. And I'm using fresh ginger today because I really prefer the zing of fresh ginger to powdered ginger. This is 2 packed tablespoons of finely grated ginger. I like to keep my ginger in the freezer, and that makes it nice and easy to hit with a microplane or a fine grater, and then just let it thaw before you measure it because it's really light and fluffy at first. And this is 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. Fresh garlic will work fine here too, and I would probably use 6 to 8 cloves depending on how big they are. And those are the very basic ingredients for a teriyaki marinade, and there are a lot of add-ins that I like to use. A little bit of Worcestershire sauce will give you some tartness in there. I also like to add in oyster flavor sauce, and if you've never had oyster flavor sauce, it's got a lot of similar notes to soy sauce, but it's much sweeter and thicker, and I guess it has some oyster flavor, and it doesn't really taste much like oyster to me if you're worried about that, but it's a really nice addition in your teriyaki marinades. I also really love to use some gochujang in this, and this is a sweet and spicy soybean paste, and it is very, very good in these meaty marinades. But I'm keeping things pretty much basic today. I will add in a teaspoon of cayenne pepper because I kind of have to, and that's really all I need for flavoring. And now the question is to use cure or not to use cure, and that is completely optional when you're making jerky. I like what it does for the color of the jerky, and it does add its own flavor, so I am going to be adding in some pink cure number 1. And it's just 1 teaspoon per 5 pounds of meat. And again, it is completely optional. I know some people have issues with using the cure. Believe me, I've heard it. I like to use it, but if it's not for you, go ahead and leave it out. But for right now, I'm gonna set the cure aside because something you need to know about using fresh ginger is that there's an enzyme in here that really wreaks havoc on the texture of your meat. It tenderizes it, but not in a pleasant way. But you can neutralize that enzyme by heating up your ginger. And you could just pop it in the microwave and get it all piping hot, and that'll do the trick. But for today's recipe, since I also have all of this sugar that I want to get dissolved, I'm going to heat the whole thing. And I will just take this, I'll bring it right up to a simmer, just barely, shut it off, and I'll let this cool all the way down before I add in the cure and then pour the whole thing over the meat. Now this marinade is all the way cooled down, and now is the time you want to do your little taste test. Very good, but you want to make sure you taste before you put in your cure if you're using cure. Now I want to get my cure in there, dissolve that all over in there. And I could have poured this marinade right in the bag and then kind of squished everything around, but it's always better to mix it up first. That way you make sure you get 100% coverage. Get all that out of there. Now, just gonna stir this up, make sure every piece gets a coating of that marinade. Ooh, that smells nice. And now, this can go right back into the bag. seal that up. Give her a little squish. And now, depending on how thick you've sliced your meat, this goes into the refrigerator to marinate for generally a day, but up to 2 days. These are pretty thick. I'll give these a day and a half. And every now and then, I will come down and massage my sack a bit. And so, I'll be back in about a day and a half to jerk my meat. Now, this has been curing and marinating for 36 hours. I think that'll be sufficient. And if you're curing your meat and you want to do a quick little test to make sure, you could take a piece of this and pop it in the microwave just for, 30 seconds or so until it's cooked, and then check the color. And if it's nice and pink all the way through, then it's cured. But I'm just going off instinct today. So, I first want to drain off any excess liquid. And there should not be much with this recipe. Alright, now we've got all that extra liquid off of there. I'm not going to rinse this at all. I want all that flavor and goo on the outside. In fact, I'm going to add even more goo. I'm going to go in here with a bunch of this sweet chili sauce. And this one is not spicy at all. More just kind of sweet and sour almost. I'll just get in there, make sure this stuff is all really coated well with that. I'm not actually measuring anything. Probably end up with somewhere between a half a cup and a cup of that in here. But I want to get that real sticky, icky. It's got a nice smell coming off of it. And now for the final touch, I'm going to throw in some white sesame seeds. Toasted sesame seed would be good here. Black sesame seed, fine. Gonna add a little bit of flavor, but give it a real cool look. And all that gooiness on there should help this stuff stick on there really well. All right, looks pretty good. Let's take it to the racks. As far as drying your jerky goes, you can do it in the smoker, you can do it in the oven. I prefer to use the dehydrator, but whatever method you're using, just make sure and keep the temperature nice and low, somewhere down between 140 and 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That way you're drying your jerky rather than cooking your jerky, and it just gets a much nicer texture that way. And I do like to put a little cooking spray on my dehydrator racks, especially with this real sticky stuff. And we'll just lay it out there, making sure that the strips are not touching each other so you get good circulation all in between them. I've got my dehydrator set to 145 degrees Fahrenheit, and I think these 1/4-inch strips are probably going to take around 8 hours to dry. I'll come out and I'll start checking them at 6 and go from there. Look at that! Woo. Now this took just about 7 hours to dehydrate, And you always want to pull your jerky when it's just slightly less dry than you want it, because it's going to continue to dry a little as it cools off. This is certainly a beautiful looking jerky. It has a gorgeous red color dotted with those white sesame seeds, and it's all coated in a glistening glaze. That is 5 stars on presentation. Of course, what really matters is the taste. Check out that bite. Oh, yeah! Absolutely nailed it. That is a meat masterpiece. It has a great balance of sweet and salty, as any good jerky should, but the teriyaki flavor is the star here. The soy sauce adds a heap of that umami, that richness that just makes meat taste meatier. And a bright pop of fresh ginger and sesame seeds, all enshrined in a sticky sweet glaze, plays on your taste buds like a haiku of flavor. Dang, that is awesome. Now, could you soak your meat in any store-bought marinade and jerk it? Probably. But I promise you, it won't be as delicious as homemade. This jerky is so good, it may just be the teriyaki king of snack meats. And after one taste, you'll be honor bound to eat more. Thanks for watching.